Although small in population, Sweden is one of the most economically significant countries due to its unique economic system. Over 90% of Sweden's production is located in the private sector. However, the state controls over 50% of the national income. In World War I, there was a rise in socialist parties in most European countries, and Sweden was no exception. In 1917, the Liberal Socialist Party formed Sweden's government. They maintained control over Sweden until 1932. In 1930, after World War I, the Great Depression that had developed in the United States spread to the rest of the world. Global market demand collapsed, especially export demand, which Sweden relied heavily on. Particularly in Sweden, businesses faced lower sales and many workers were laid off. In order for businesses to survive against lower prices, they cut wage rates. Workers went on strike to protest these wage cuts. The Swedish government sent soldiers to control the strike, and in 1931, several workers were shot and killed. There was public outcry, which eventually caused a shift to the current political party. In 1932, the Social Democratic Party won the election. The Swedish government formed into its current democratic social welfare state. Although this current system has been very successful, the primary weakness of a social welfare state is that a large share of people's incomes must be taken as taxes to pay for the social services the state provides. So although many basic necessities are provided for by the government, most people are left with little spending money. Despite everything, Sweden has one of the most successful economies in the world. Swedish industry has successfully competed in the global market despite rises in wage rates, shorter workdays, and increased vacation time mandated by the Swedish government. Additionally, the unemployment rate in Sweden has been kept reasonably low for the past 20 years.
Sweden is part of two preferential trade agreements, the Europe Agreement and Association Agreements. Sweden's trade policy is based on free trade. The government's statement on trade policy that was presented in the Riksdag on 14th of April 2010 begins with the phrase, "Sweden's development from poverty to a welfare society is the history of deregulation and free trade. 3/4 of Sweden's trade is conducted in the EU internal market." The government's ultimate aim is for Sweden to belong to the core of the EU and to be an active and constructive force in EU cooperation. The best way of opening up trade globally is via multilateral agreements. This is also the only way of ensuring a fair, stable, and predictable international trade system. Completing the current trade round, the Doha round, in the World Trade Organization is therefore one of the most important priorities of the government's trade policy. Free trade made it possible for entrepreneurs to found and develop many of the world-leading Swedish companies of today. In some of these fields, Sweden has been a forerunner in terms of deregulation and liberalization. It is therefore natural for Sweden to work within the EU towards the liberalization of policies in these areas. For a country that is strongly dependent on free markets for its products, it is essential to promote the opening of export markets all over the world.
The resources in Sweden include timber, hydropower, and iron ore. The Swedish government is working on the development of a strategy for the long-term and sustainable use of Sweden's mineral resources so that they can use the minerals like iron ore in their main industries without fear of depletion. Many of their main industries are driven by innovation, which the country is very competitive in. The Sweden government has an innovation strategy, which is a long-term effort to continue and hopefully even strengthen Sweden's leading position in terms of innovation. Motor vehicles, telecommunications, pharmaceuticals, industrial machines, and precision equipment are just a few of their leading industries. Major exported products include mechanical engineering, electronic equipment, chemical products and pharmaceuticals, ore, steel and other metals, oil, gas, and electricity. This correlates to the country's specialization. With imports, however, Sweden receives live animals and animal products, vegetable products, prepared food and beverages, and manufactured foods. Then mineral products and chemical products, wood products, paper, and textiles. You can see how Sweden is not a highly agricultural nation because they are much more efficient by specializing in innovation and capital-intensive industries. In this graph, you can see how the top countries that Sweden trades with are within Europe. A reason for this could be because these countries are nearby, but mainly this is because of the trade agreements that Sweden has in the European Union. About 40% of their trade is within Western Europe alone.
The Swedish government has fundamentally reoriented its foreign direct investment policies, moving away from a complex system of overlapping governmental and private restrictions towards a more open and liberal regime. The most fundamental recent initiative has been easing restrictions on foreign ownership of Swedish firms. Foreign investors are no longer required to get permission to acquire shares in Swedish firms beyond certain levels, and legislation was enacted at the end of 1992 to prohibit discriminatory rules in company bylaws on ownership. In addition to fewer restrictions on foreign ownership of Swedish companies, foreigners will be freer to create and transact their own businesses in Sweden. On July 1st, 1992, foreigners were no longer required to get permission to transact business in Sweden.
The two graphs displayed show an increase in both foreign investment for Sweden and an increase in Sweden's investment in other countries. With corporate taxes below EU and OECD averages and a raft of recent regulation changes, Sweden has gone from being considered a tax hell to a tax haven. In a move to attract business investment, create new jobs, and prevent companies from leaving the country, the government slashed corporate tax to 22% at the turn of the year from 26.3%. The significant reduction of the corporate tax is expected to strengthen the investment climate and growth in Sweden, the government said in a statement as the scheme was unveiled last year. Because Sweden isn't situated in the center of Europe, it's appropriate for their corporate taxes to be competitive.
Sweden's average annual GDP growth was 2.68%, reaching a historical high of 6.9% in September of 2010, and a record low of negative 6.7% in March of 2009. This graph shows the change in growth of GDP over time. There was a significant decrease in GDP in 2009 due to the recession, but has since grown to be larger than it had been before. Sweden's GDP reached its all-time high of $539.3 billion in December of 2012. While GDP is not everything, it is a good indicator of how well Sweden's economy has been doing. In a list of the top 50 countries with the highest GDPs, Sweden was ranked number 21 in 2011. Sweden has constantly been ranked in the top 5 countries with the highest standard of living, and it continues to rise, attracting many people from other countries to make Sweden a permanent home. We believe that because of the government's heavier taxes to provide more public welfare, it has helped to maintain Sweden's high standard of living. The government has cut income taxes by $11.1 billion, or about 2.1% of the economy, since coming to power in 2006. It has also reduced corporate and payroll taxes and abolished a levy on wealth. The results were a booming economy and a fall in unemployment. In this graph, we can see the low rates of unemployment. However, unemployment increased due to the recession but has since been decreasing once again. Previously, the inflation rate was fluctuating but has recently become stable. Sweden's current inflation rate is at 1.18%.
As of 2013, Sweden's economy is ranked 18th in the Index of Economic Freedom, making it one of the world's 20 freest economies in the history of the index. Sweden has been able to weather the financial downturn in 2009 better than other European countries. This is due to the country's solid foundations of economic freedom. Its economy is open and welcoming to global trade and investment, leading to vibrant entrepreneurial activity.